Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for February 8th through 14th. This week I read one book, I watched one movie, and I listened to 3 books. I think it's been a while since I've only had 5 things to talk about, but that's because I was kind of sort of on vacation this week. I work on the internet, so I can work from anywhere, so I did work, but we also went on vacation this week, which mostly meant a 4-hour drive there and a 4-hour drive back, and then also exploring the area that we were vacationing at, which was beautiful. Which of course meant that some of that time I had extra time for audiobook listening, but I didn't have a lot of extra time for reading or watching things. Although I did read more things, I am more than halfway through another book, I just didn't finish it by the end of this week. In any case, let's talk about what I actually did finish. The one book that I finished with my eyeballs was called Lady, Scottish last name that I don't say because all of the world's a stage. Although I kind of feel like this is one of those things where I might get away with it because it's not directly referencing the play, which is kind of how you're allowed to talk about it, but it is directly referencing a character from the play, and this is a retelling of sorts. So this is basically all about how that character came to live in this Scottish castle. This author has imagined her as being from a region in France, or at least what is now known as France, because this was many hundreds of years ago. And this author's also decided that this character has a little bit of a backstory to her, in that she's quite young and somebody decided that she was cursed by a witch at some point, so if she looks you right in the eyes, she can make you do things. And this, of course, only works with men. And when this idea was first introduced, I thought it was just her dad, like, pretending that this was a thing to make her more intriguing. But then later we find out that she actually did look somebody in the eye and it didn't go super well, so I guess it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, or there was actually a witch involved, who knows. Here's my thing with books like this. If you name a book this way, I'm going to assume that it's a direct retelling of the Scottish play that we all had to read in high school, or at least if you grew up in North America, or I assume the UK. Although you wouldn't be calling it high school at that point, but you know what I mean. My problem is, so much was changed in this that it verges on reimagining or something inspired by, and I would have had way more respect for it if the reimagining was just mentioned in the blurb or in the author's note, as opposed to directly naming it this way. However, the way you're going to make the big bucks is by naming it this way, because people will go, oh, I would love to read a book from her perspective. But generally when people say that, they want to see the play that they know reinterpreted from that perspective, not the play that they know completely ripped apart and everything's a little bit different and strange. Some of the same things still happened, but there were things in this that I was like, unless I fell asleep while I was reading this, I'm pretty sure there wasn't a dragon. Part of me thought going into this I probably should have reread the play because it's been a very, very long time, but then as I was reading this I was like, nope, that would have been wasted time because this is different enough that it doesn't matter. The one movie that I watched this week is Argylle. This is something we picked completely randomly based on we could see a bunch of the cast when we were scrolling through things, and we were like, whatever this is, I'm gonna put it on. And then I put it on and Chad had this visceral fear that it was a musical, just the way it started, which would have been hilarious because I have accidentally and sometimes on purpose tricked him into watching musicals with me. But this was not a musical. However, it was an incredibly ridiculous action movie that I actually really liked, but I can understand why people wouldn't like it. And by people, I mean macho dudes who just went in for an action flick and then found something that was an action flick that's also really fun and ridiculous, and they went, oh, this is too girly for an action flick. I'm assuming those are the people that don't like this movie. In any case, as it turns out, as this movie opens, we are seeing a scene from the end of a book, the 4th book written by this famous author who's been writing this series for a while called Argylle. She's at a bookish event for the series, so she's answering some questions, and then we see her go home, and she's actually trying to finish up the 5th book. And then her mom, played by Catherine O'Hara, reads it and was like, I think you should come visit and we can go over some of the things in the book because I don't think it's quite perfect yet. And then when she's on the way to do that, clearly some espionage things start happening around her. This is one of those movies where if you've seen movies before, you can guess some of the things that are about to happen, but also there's some fun twists in it that I did enjoy. There are some sequences to it that are absolutely ridiculous, and if you're really hardcore and militant about how, you know, you shouldn't be doing that if you're doing a fight sequence or whatever, you're not gonna have fun with this, and there might just not be enough joy in your life. Also, I wanted to mention that at the very end of this, there was a tease that the first book in her series first two actually might be turned into movies. However, apparently this movie flopped enough that that might not happen. We at least haven't seen it actually being greenlit. And I, for one, would actually watch those movies, so I hope that happens, especially because at the very end I was like, wait, why do I know that bartender? And then I realized I know that bartender because he's the lead prosecutor in Law & Order UK, which I watched all of on BritBox a few months ago. So if anyone from Marv Studios is listening, yes, I would like to watch those movies, please. And for anyone going, Marv Studios, why do I know that name? This is interconnected with the Kingsman series. On to the audiobooks I listened to, the first one being Answers in the Pages. This is a middle grade book that is split up into some interesting sections, and I really liked figuring that out as the book went on. So, we've got a few different students of note at this middle school. One of them is Gideon. He's in this classroom with his two best friends, but one day this new boy moves to town, and for whatever reason he feels really drawn to getting to know him. They end up having to work together on a book project where they're reading Harriet the Spy, and based on that they need to share a notebook and tell each other 5 things about themselves that other people don't generally know. Or at least that person doesn't know, because a lot of the people in this class have known each other forever, so they kind of know everything about each other, but it's really fun because Roberto is brand new to town, so there's lots they don't know about each other. In another classroom we have Donovan, and his class has been told to read this book called The Adventurers, and he brings it home one day and he's only read the first chapter or so, and one of the fun things about this book is you do get chapters of The Adventurers sprinkled throughout the text for context, which is really, really fun. But when he brings the book home and just goes to watch some TV, his mom is really nosy, and she's one of those people that reads the end of the book first, which I've never understood that whole thing, but some people do it, and she reads the last few sentences or the last paragraph of the book and decides there's something objectionable about this book, because that paragraph has to mention that the two boys in this book love each other. How they love each other is incredibly up to interpretation, but she feels that her precious son shouldn't know about this at his young age. It's not appropriate. Oh, and did I mention this takes place in Florida? So without even talking to her son about it, besides being like, I don't want you reading this book, which of course makes him get a copy from his friend and read the entire book just to figure out what she was mad about, she goes on a crusade to get this book pulled from the curriculum. This is obviously an incredibly timely book because this is real life in Florida and many other places across America, and that's creeping into Canada, so if you could just not, that'd be good. There were certain little reveals I saw coming for certain things, which I really enjoyed seeing ahead of time because obviously this is written for an age range younger than I am, so I probably figured it out sooner than somebody of the appropriate age range would, and I was absolutely delighted by these realizations. This was a very good time and I highly recommend it. The next book I listened to is The Sun Does Shine by Anthony Ray Hinton, who spent nearly 30 years on death row for crimes he did not commit. But when you're a black man in Alabama and you have an all-white jury, an all-white judge, and it turns out your lawyer is friends with the prosecutor, yeah, not a chance that you're getting out of that situation. Ray ended up working very closely with Bryan Stevenson, who has also written a book about kind of the situation of the South and his work trying to get people off death row. So I had read that book previously from his perspective, and it was very interesting to have this perspective of somebody who was actually in jail and heard a lot of people he knew die by the hands of the state of Alabama. This book is incredibly impactful and hopeful and talks about how the system is just completely messed up, which is something I already knew, but having these first-hand accounts just reinforces that. And the third audiobook I listened to this week is The Corruption of Hollis Brown. This takes place in an incredibly small town where the major population of adults actually needs to leave the town and drive really, really far to the nearest cities for work. There is a lot of poverty in this area, and it's kind of just always been that way. Our main character Hollis has some destructive tendencies. He's not overly nice to people. In fact, he'll actually purposely goad people on so they will retaliate against him. And he really only has these two friends. Annie, who he's been friends with for 9 years and has kind of a crush on, but if she was ever going to get together with him, it would have happened by now. And Yulia, who showed up to their friend group much more recently, but she's awesome. He honestly doesn't understand how he has friends like this because nobody else really wants to associate with him, and he's pretty jaded about that. Something you need to know about this area is there's a section called Rosetown, and that section is incredibly haunted, so people don't tend to go there, period. If they do go there, it's generally during the day, but about once a year, high school students decide that they're going to try to stay overnight, and it never goes well. And he's dragged to one of these events, something goes terribly awry, people try to pin a horrible circumstance on him, even though he's the person that tried to help in the circumstance, didn't actually hurt anybody. And when he's off trying to clear his head about this, he meets this really weird and interesting guy named Walt, and this completely changes the course of his existence. I didn't know anything about this book going into it, which is why I'm trying not to tell you anything about the major things that happen. Just trying to give you the broad strokes of how we get to the moment where his life completely changes. And if I had to describe this book in a few words, I'd say it's incredibly desperate and hungry and very intimate at points. It's also a circumstance that I've never seen anybody be put in before, and it's kind of interesting as a thought experiment outside of what's happening in the book. That's enough of being vague. I really enjoyed this one. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you would hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you're here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!